What if we told you that the most potent forms of influence, well, what if they don't require a map or a fixed capital or even a border you can point to?
It's a big idea.
It is. It really challenges everything we think we know about how governance is supposed to work.
It absolutely does. I mean, we're all conditioned to see power as something fixed, something tied to territory. The palace, the capital city, the lines on a map. We think stability means permanence.
Exactly. But today, we're skipping the maps. We're going to do a deep dive into this fascinating concept of nomadic oligarchy based on the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series. And our mission really is to give you a shortcut to understanding this idea of influence without a map, how this incredibly flexible form of governance actually works through these dynamic networks of connections rather than the geographic control.
And what's so fascinating here is that nomadic oligarchy, it represents a fundamental shift in how we even define influence.
A total shift.
Right? It's not like the traditional oligarchies, which are all rooted in territory and permanence. For this kind of power holder, their identity is defined by adaptability, by constant motion. The power's in the flow, not in the anchor.
So that mobility, that's the critical ingredient.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, if mobility is the key, doesn't that create a ton of instability? How did these ancient leaders manage the risks of being on the move across huge, dangerous areas?
That is the core tension, you're right. And it forces us to look beyond simple geography. This system, it really challenges our beliefs about governing, about belonging, even about authority in a world that's all connected.
Right.
And the historical examples, they give us this profound insight into how you can organize and influence vast areas without ever needing that permanence, which is why, we can connect this framework to really contemporary discussions about things like global citizenship or these evolving transnational structures.
Okay, let's unpack this, and let's use the ultimate historical figure who just embodied this concept perfectly. Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane.
He's the textbook example.
He really is.
Timur, born in 1326 near Samarkand, he rises to lead the Barlas tribe. And he manages to build an empire of just staggering scope. It stretched all the way from the Mediterranean clear over to India.
And this wasn't a static thing, was it?
Not at all. It was continuous movement. We're talking 35 years of nonstop campaigning.
So here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the core idea we pulled from the sources. Timur, he deliberately rejected the whole monarchical style of other empires. He never called himself Khan.
Right, which was the traditional title tied to a fixed lineage, to Mongol territory.
So why not? Why reject it?
That refusal was a deeply strategic choice. He embraced mobility as a core principle of his rule. He didn't settle on one fixed capital in the way we'd think of it. Instead, he operated with multiple courts that moved seasonally.
Multiple courts?
Yes. Just try to imagine the logistics of that. Moving tens of thousands of people, administrators, scholars, a massive military, all based on strategic needs, or even just following weather patterns for grazing the cavalry's horses.
Wow, so the constant movement wasn't just practical, it was a statement, a philosophical statement that power doesn't have to be tied to a specific place.
Exactly. Influence was asserted through these dynamic networks of loyalty, not property lines on a map.
Let's talk about that, this idea of fluid governance.
Yeah, and here's the paradox. Even when he was constantly on the move, he was also actively transforming Samarkand into this premier intellectual hub. He did it through intense cultural patronage.
So he's pulling people in from all over.
All over the known world. He was recruiting the best scholars, the best artists to elevate the city, even if he himself only spent short periods of time there.
That's a powerful point. He uses a fixed location as this beacon of prestige, a library of knowledge almost. Yet he himself is always transient. It's transient power leaving an incredibly permanent cultural footprint.
Precisely.
Okay.
And his administrative style was deliberately decentralized. His regional governors, his appointed rulers, they had a lot of independence. But they were always accountable to Timur, even from afar.
And the military campaigns, they weren't just about grabbing land.
They served a dual purpose. Yes, spanning territory, of course. But they were also about continuously asserting his personal presence, his authority. You could almost think of every campaign as a sort of empire-wide HR and audit check.
And that's what creates this paradoxical influence the sources talk so much about. The monuments he built, these incredible mosques and observatories, they symbolize absolute permanence, stability.
But the ruler who commissioned them was never settled. His influence was everywhere, but it was also nowhere in particular. Its authority defined by motion, but stabilized by monumental architecture. It's fascinating.
Okay, that brings us right to the mechanics of it all. Mobility is clearly more than just, moving from point A to point B. It shows how identity itself can break free from a location.
It does. The nomadic oligarch's power comes almost entirely from the relationships built along their journeys, not from territorial claims.
And those relationships form these fluid networks.
That's what the sources call them. They're the unseen framework. You can imagine them as these living webs stretching across continents. They aren't fixed institutions in marble buildings. They're sustained by constant exchange. Cultural, economic, diplomatic.
So to make this a bit more concrete for you listening, think of a trade envoy.
Right.
A highly trusted person who travels from Samarkand to Damascus, maybe even to the Chinese courts. That person isn't just carrying silk and spices. They're carrying Timor's diplomatic capital. They're carrying intellectual property, negotiated alliances. They are themselves a living node in that network.
Exactly right. And those nodes allowed individuals to gain loyalty in one court, then go negotiate an alliance hundreds of miles away, and then influence trade policies somewhere else entirely.
All without a standing army or a fixed bureaucracy sitting there with them?
All without it. Adaptability, then. That's what sets the successful nomadic oligarchies apart from all those failed rigid empires we read about in history class.
Because those traditional state systems, with their heavy fixed administrative centers, they just couldn't pivot fast enough.
They couldn't. They'd collapse when trade routes shifted, or a new rival popped up.
Which raises the most critical question. How did they manage these huge territories, which weren't even connected, without that fixed infrastructure? I mean, if the local governors were so independent, how did Timor stop them from just breaking away?
What was the mechanism for accountability?
Yes, exactly.
The answer is, well, it's a combination of decentralized governance and just ruthless efficiency in how information flowed.
Okay.
So decision-making flowed really fast through those trusted intermediaries. They were empowered to adapt policies to local needs. But the accountability part, that was all tied to communication and logistics.
So a good messenger system.
A brilliant one. Timor maintained these incredibly sophisticated and rapid messenger systems, relying on networks of relay stations. Dispatches about, say, tax revenue or local unrest could travel hundreds of miles faster than in the centralized states they were replacing.
And the threat of a rapid, informed military reprisal kept the governors in line.
It did. So the resilience of the whole structure came from embracing change. But it was change backed by very fast intelligence. They were masters of shifting their focus.
And their economic system must have reflected that.
Completely. It was geared entirely for this mobility. They prioritized portable wealth over land ownership.
Because land is fixed. It's easy to conquer, hard to manage from a distance.
Exactly. Portable wealth is power you can take with you.
When you say portable wealth in the 14th century, what are we talking about? It's not just chests of gold, is it?
It's much broader than that. I mean, yes, of course, gold, jewels, silver bullion, that was crucial. But there were more sophisticated forms, things like negotiated letters of credit from merchant guilds, sort of early versions of negotiable paper wealth.
Interesting.
And crucially, they also saw human capital as portable wealth. Master artisans, scholars, engineers, but they were often relocated, sometimes by force, sometimes by invitation, to Samarkand.
Boosting the intellectual value of the core?
Exactly. Even if Timor wasn't there. And controlling a key trade junction, just taxing the flow of goods, was way more valuable than owning all the fields around it.
So if we pull back from that, what does this all mean for identity, even today? The very existence of these figures. It sort of naturally gives rise to this idea of global citizenship, right? An identity without borders.
It does. They moved seamlessly between courts, between languages and traditions. They belonged everywhere and nowhere, all at the same time.
And the foundation for that was cultural hybridity.
And this wasn't just passive tolerance, oh, you could do your thing over there. It was strategic synthesis. It was active recruitment. Timur's court was intentionally multilingual, multicultural. He actively sought out and supported scholars from Persian, Turkic, Chinese, and Indian traditions.
But why was that so important? Why that synthesis?
Because by embodying multiple cultural streams, your influence becomes inherently portable. If your court supports astronomers from Persia and poets from Khorasan and architectural styles borrowed from India, you automatically gain a recognizable footprint and legitimacy across a huge area.
You can speak multiple cultural languages.
You can. It makes your decrees, your patronage relevant in all these different contexts.
And all these diverse streams were held together by those transnational networks, the actual power infrastructure.
They were, in effect, invisible maps, connecting distant cities not through a shared government, but through shared economic interests, trade routes, diplomatic channels, even scholarly correspondence.
And these connections, they must have created alternative forms of belonging.
They absolutely did. You didn't just identify as a subject of the Barless tribe. Maybe you identified as a merchant of the Silk Road Network or a scholar from the Samarkand School of Astronomy. These functional affiliations, they often became stronger than any regional or national identity in terms of your actual practical loyalty.
The legacy of these systems is, well, it's incredibly relevant today. We see these same patterns shaping modern leadership philosophy, maybe more than we even realize.
Oh, for sure. The nomadic oligarch's toolkit adaptability, cultural synthesis, authority based on relationships, reliance on fast networks, it mirrors the exact skills you need to navigate our interconnected world. We can draw some really specific modern parallels from the source material.
Okay, let's spend a minute on that. We mentioned digital nomads, but how does a contemporary multinational executive, for example, actually mimic Timur's seasonal court movements?
Well, think about the annual or quarterly resource allocation cycle of a massive global corporation. The CEO, the regional heads, they are constantly on the move. They're shifting focus based on market need.
Okay.
So maybe in Q1, they're opening a new office in Singapore. Q2, the focus is all on supply chain logistics in Eastern Europe. Q3, they're consolidating marketing in the U.S. They don't have one single fixed capital where all the power sits.
Power flows to the current priority.
Exactly. And their authority comes from understanding all these different local contexts and being able to adapt their policies almost instantly.
That's a great analogy. It's power from mastering economic movement, not controlling a piece of land. And what about social movements? How do they fit in?
Social movements are maybe the purest contemporary parallel to those fluid networks. They organize almost exclusively through horizontal peer-to-peer networks.
Digital or otherwise.
Right. And they completely reject the old vertical top-down command structures of older institutions. Their power base is entirely adaptable. If one communication channel gets shut down, they immediately shift to another. Their resilience is in that distribution of authority, just like Timur's decentralized governors.
So the power, both then and now, comes from blending cultures and adapting quickly, not from controlling a fixed piece of territory. It's a complete inversion of how we traditionally think about power structures.
Nomadic oligarchy really offers a vital perspective on power. It's one that transcends borders and just defies rigid definitions. And historical figures like Timur, they showed us that influence without maps can reshape entire civilizations.
Through the sheer mastery of movement and that strategic adaptability.
Especially when you combine it with a focus on portable wealth.
They operated through these fluid, fast networks instead of nations. They built flexible systems that lasted precisely because they refused to be permanent. Their influence proved that identity can be fluid, it can be multifaceted.
And that perspective, it helps us understand our modern world, a world where borders are, frankly, increasingly unable to restrict ambition or creativity or connection. The sources really encourage us to rethink what authority and legitimacy even mean in this age of global flow.
So here's our final provocative thought for you to consider, building on everything we've talked about. What if true power in the 21st century lies not in controlling land, but in mastering the art of movement?
And not just physical movement.
No, the rapid, intelligent movement of capital, of data, and of human networks. What if achieving an identity without maps actually represents the ultimate, most resilient form of freedom and interconnectedness?